Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a morning ramble. And today's ramble is happening in a voiceover studio. This is Studio City Sound. This is also a place where there's a lot of music recorded, and I used to come here and do voiceover gigs back in the day when I was a voiceover actor. And it's where I record the Caffeine for the Soul podcasts. And I'm in today. About every couple months, I come in and sort of batch record a bunch of the podcasts. I used to do them at home. I used to do them all weekly in real time. And it was very exciting and incredibly time consuming. And at some point, it dawned on me it would be a lot more fun and sustainable to come into a place where they do this for a living and let them do the recording. And they do a fantastic job. So I thought I'd just take a few minutes before I start today to kind of share the process, because I know people are always go, how do you do all this stuff? How do you produce all this stuff? And the truth is, I kind of know, but it's kind of like what I kind of know is I kind of know that it will happen, that if I show up and open my mouth, stuff will come out, words usually and often coherently. But I do sort of like to come up with themes. So I'll show you my detailed scripts for today. So I've got, see what we've got here. We've got, so here are the podcast notes. It's going to be very messy, but you can kind of see, so we got the nav system, the homing mechanism, catching wise, the original point, the space before thought. And I'm sure before all is said and done, I'll have 4 or 5 more that we'll record. And ultimately, the way they work, the reason that I can do them without scripting, though I do think them through and I do often have little slightly more detailed notes when I sit down, is a quote. It's kind of summed up best in this quote. And it's a quote that I have been told repeatedly now is not John Wesley. So John Wesley was a sort of a 19th century revivalist preacher. And the way I had always heard the story is that he was asked, how do you just show up and preach to all these people? And he said, reportedly, I just light myself on fire and people come to watch me burn. Now, it turns out he probably never said that, but it's a beautiful description of how it feels to me. I don't so much light myself on fire, but I allow myself to be filled up with the spark of life, with the spark of creativity, with the spark of what feels to me like the divine. And when it fills me up to overflowing, the overflow becomes the podcast, the overflow becomes the ramble, the overflow becomes the video, the overflow becomes the training, the overflow becomes the book. And if I try and write or speak or podcast or ramble before I'm on fire, it rarely works. Occasionally, just the very act of opening my mouth starts the fire. That becomes almost like creating a draft, like blowing on the logs and then the logs catch fire. But in many ways, it's as simple as that when we allow ourselves to overflow with this energy, with this creative force, what comes out is our product. It is what we produce. And because it comes of this energy, it carries that flavor, seasoned with a little bit of us. And I always think a little bit of us goes a long way. So people will often talk about, well, if I'm just speaking from that place, it'll be generic, it'll be impersonal. And it's like, no, that energy is alive and impersonal and universal. But when it comes through you, it will be you flavored. And when it comes through me, it's me flavored. And sometimes a little bit of seasoning brings out the flavor in the meat. Sometimes that little bit of you flavor, that little bit of me flavor, is all it takes to bring out the flavor of the divine, the flavor of the creative potential, the flavor of aliveness itself. And I encourage you, if you've never tried it, do it. Open your mouth and start talking and see if you can create that draft that brings the fire up to the surface. Or the next time you find yourself filled up with life and light, Start pouring it out onto paper. Start pouring it out into the world and see what comes. Have fun, learn heaps, happy experimenting, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'll talk to you soon.